headline that people need to be aware of when you've looked at 30 years of these types of wars?
That bombs don't just hit targets, they change politics.
What does that mean?
That means that before the bombs fall, and even as the bombs are falling now, we tend to focus on the tactical success of bombing. We tend to ask, did the bombs hit the targets? And it's, with the smart bomb age, it's almost mesmerizing. They hit the target and destroy the target. Crater dirt, crater concrete, destroy buildings 90% of the time.
That is the sentence everything else in this conversation hangs on. Because if he's right, then the real danger isn't whether a bomb lands, it's what that bomb changes after it lands. Robert Pape has spent decades studying air power, terrorism, escalation, and political violence. He has advised U.S. administrations, taught military strategy, and built the frameworks used to think about the kind of conflict now unfolding around Iran. But what makes this conversation matter is not just what he knows, it's what he thinks almost everyone is still missing. This is Synthesize, where we turn long podcast conversations into their most important ideas. Modern war makes destruction look clean. Precision-guided weapons hit their coordinates. Buildings collapse, politicians declare success, and for a moment, it feels like control. But Pape's first point is that this confidence can be deeply misleading.
These stealthy aircraft that can penetrate the airspace, very small risk of loss. And then you see, but we don't know where the nuclear material is. The whole point of this is not to destroy a building. It's to get at the 5%, 20%, 60% enriched uranium that's the material for bombs. And last May, it was very clear they had the material for 16 bombs. Now, not
60 nuclear bombs.
16.
Nuclear bombs.
Yes.
This is the documentary's first major reversal. The visible target is not the real target. The building is the shell. The material is the story. And once that material is dispersed, hidden, or moved, perfect bombing footage can create the exact opposite of strategic certainty. That takes us to the emotional center of the interview. Not that the strike failed tactically, but that success may have started a process nobody now fully controls.
Well, everything's amazing. We've taken out all their guys. What are we missing?
We're missing that we're stuck in a trap of our own making. I'll explain what that trap is, but the key consequence of the trap is we're losing control. We are losing control of the situation. And what you are seeing with President Trump is he's trying to regain control. Now, the problem is that starting not just a week ago Saturday, but starting back in June when we...
That phrase matters. Regain control. It implies control has already been lost. And once leaders are trying to recover control in public, they are no longer acting from confidence. They are acting from pressure, optics, fear, and momentum. Most viewers here take out the leader and assume the problem gets smaller. Pape's argument is harsher than that. In some regimes, killing the top figure doesn't weaken the system. It removes the person who was restraining the worst outcome.
And that's called a fatwa. And as a religious doctrine, he issued 2 that said Iran should not have nuclear weapons. The guy we killed was one of the guardrails against nuclear weapons.
How does that? He was developing them in his country?
No, he's developing the enrichment material. They hadn't been fashioned yet that we know of as nuclear weapons, okay? So we're worried about, again, this enrichment going from 5% to 20% to 60%.
That is one of the most counterintuitive moments in the entire conversation. Pape is not saying the regime was benign. He's saying systems often contain internal breaks. Remove the wrong person, and you don't end the danger. You accelerate it. Then he pushes the idea further. Leadership decapitation sounds decisive from far away. Up close, it can harden everyone still standing.
Man army. So this is what I was trying to explain in my Substacks, where when you take out the leader, you may kill the leader, but you get in its place a harder regime, a more resilient regime, a tougher regime that wants to lash back even more aggressively.
Because you killed Dad.
You killed dad. And also, if you don't lash back, how does the new leader get his credibility with everybody else? If he's a wimp, why doesn't he get a bullet in the back of the head? You see, just because he's appointed a new leader, he's still, just like when you're the head of a new company.
That's not just geopolitics. That's human behavior inside power structures. A successor doesn't inherit legitimacy automatically. He has to prove strength. And in wartime, proving strength often means escalation. Here, the interview stops being abstract. Pape lays out a 3-stage escalation logic, and in his view, stage 2 is already visible. If you can't beat your opponent symmetrically, you widen the battlefield horizontally.
Published this piece today in Foreign Affairs about how Iran's winning the escalation war. So it just came out just a few hours before we came on. And what's happening here is I call it horizontal escalation, because what they're doing now is they're using drones, mostly a few missiles, but mostly drones. This was almost all missiles, no drones. And they're using their drone capacity, which they have a lot of, and it's precision. These drones are like precision-guided weapons. They go right to the target. And what they're trying to do is break this coalition.
For anyone that can't see at the moment,
That means the war no longer lives only where the bombs first fell. Now it lives in airports, shipping lanes, neighboring states, insurance markets, tourism, public fear, and alliance politics. The battlefield becomes economic, psychological, and regional. At this point, Pape names the core mechanism driving the whole story. And once he says it plainly, the pattern becomes hard to unsee.
stage 1 is...
Okay, stage 1, you are beginning the escalation trap. In this case, it's a smart bomb trap, but because it's with smart bombs, where you have tactical success, near perfect. Call it 100%, because it really is. But that doesn't mean you have strategic success. Tactical success plus strategic failure. Then that strategic failure weighs on you over time because the enemy still...
That may be the cleanest summary of modern intervention you'll hear anywhere. Tactical success is measurable. Strategic failure arrives later. One looks like certainty on a screen. The other shows up months later in politics, retaliation, cost, and drift. Halfway through the conversation, the tone changes. It's no longer about whether the original attack worked. It's about what kind of presidency and what kind of country gets formed inside a trap like this. Because once a conflict becomes politically unresolved, every next move gets uglier.
To predict what you think happens next, what would you predict?
Well, I say this at the end of the Foreign Affairs article that just literally came out a couple hours ago, which is President Trump is on the horns of a dilemma. And he has no golden off-ramp. He's looking for off-ramps, but there's no golden one where he comes out politically ahead. So he's got a choice, sometimes called a Hobbesian choice, where you cut your losses, accept political loss now. And right now, if he pulls back, and what does it mean to pull back? You got to pull your forces back. It's not enough to say you're just doing a pause.
That's the pattern break in the episode. This is no longer military chess. It's political pain management. And when there's no good exit, leaders start choosing between immediate humiliation and delayed disaster. One of the bleakest ideas in the interview is this: bombing a state to stop it from wanting a nuclear deterrent may actually strengthen its incentive to build one.
Bombs. Okay. If they're willing to have their entire population destroyed they just need one bomb, take out Tel Aviv, they're done, right? That's not what's going on. They're following the North Korea plan. The North Korea plan, the North Korea figured out when we went through this with North Korea in the 90s, okay, the very same thing, well, except we didn't do the bombing because it was not going to, we avoided the trap. What they want is multiple bombs at the same time. So what they want to do, if they can do this, is have, say, 5 bombs working at the same time. And the first bomb goes off as a test.
The point here is not that a bomb gets used immediately. The point is leverage, survival, immunity. Once a regime concludes that only nuclear capability can stop decapitation or invasion, the logic shifts from ideology to self-preservation. And then comes the forecast that gives the interview its real edge. Pape is not speaking in hindsight. He is making a live probability call about what happens next.
Where Trump puts
Okay, I'll go 75-25.
75% which way?
That we will send in some ground forces to get that dispersed material. The only 25% would be if somehow magically the Iranians gave it to us.
So
that's where the 25% comes from, because there is some chance
maybe
that there's some. I don't want to. I mean, we live in the real world here. But I think the problem we're going to face is it's going to become more. And if you're in Iran right now, exactly why aren't you fashioning the nuclear weapon?
This is the moment the argument cashes out. If dispersed material can't be verified from the air, pressure builds for boots on the ground. And once ground forces enter, the war changes category entirely. Pape then zooms out. He's not just describing a single crisis, he's describing a recurring machine, one that has already appeared in other conflicts.
But I just want to point out, how is it that Israel got itself into the idea they were going to cleanse, expel large portions of the 2 million out of Gaza? That happened because they got into stage 3 of the escalation trap in Gaza. So this isn't just about America. So we're only talking about the escalation frameworks with respect to this one conflict, really. It applies much more broadly. I've developed these since I taught for the Air Force because I needed to find a way to help our government, our military.
That broadening matters, because if the pattern repeats across cases, then this is not a one-off policy mistake. It's a structural failure in how powerful states imagine bombing can solve political problems. And then near the end, the interview does something unexpected. It turns home. After an hour of war, strategy, deterrence, and escalation, Pape lands on what may be the most unsettling warning of all.
They did even more of that in Minneapolis. So this trajectory, Stephen, that we're on, where we are seeing the incredible normalization of political violence, and it's happening on both the right and the left. I'm not trying to make moral equivalence, but it is, and the book will explain this, is probably the greatest danger that we face, because if we are our own worst enemies, think of what that means for us being that great power that is so important for us, and the great future we want for our families and our communities here. We are in danger of becoming our own worst enemies, not for a day, not for a month, but
That's why this conversation lingers. It starts with bombing Iran, but it ends with a warning about internal decay. The deepest threat may not just be what America unleashes abroad. It may be what repeated escalation teaches a country to normalize at home. 3 ideas remain after everything else fades. First, destroying a target is not the same as solving the problem. Precision can create the illusion of control, while the real danger simply moves underground. Second, leadership strikes can backfire politically. Remove the wrong figure, and you may not weaken a regime. You may radicalize its successor and strengthen its reasons to escalate. Third, wars of choice change the attacker too. They reshape domestic politics, incentives, fear, and public tolerance for violence. The bombs do not stay over there. That is what makes this conversation more than a commentary on one president or one week. It is an argument about how modern escalation works, and how quickly tactical confidence can become strategic entrapment. So the question this leaves us with is simple, but not comfortable. When a country believes force can still solve what politics has already complicated, how many times can it repeat the pattern before the pattern starts remaking the country itself? If this kind of breakdown helps you think differently, you'll probably enjoy the next video too.